Park Do-yoon stood near the edge of the grand ballroom, holding a glass of something purple that he was too afraid to drink. The liquid moved on its own inside the glass, and he was almost certain it had blinked at him twice. 3 years ago, humanity had discovered that they were not alone in the universe. Actually, that was not quite right. The universe had discovered humanity, and it had laughed. Humans were new. Humans were young. Humans were like babies, taking their first steps while ancient civilizations watched with mild amusement. The Interstellar Alliance had existed for millions of years. Hundreds of species had joined it, traded with it, fought for it, and died for it. And now, humanity had received an invitation to their first diplomatic ball on Station Lumina. Do-hyun was not supposed to be here. He was just a junior cultural attaché, which was a fancy way of saying he organized files and made coffee for important people. But one of the senior diplomats had gotten food poisoning from trying alien cuisine, and another had broken his leg in a low-gravity accident. So here Do-hyun was wearing a suit that did not quite fit, representing all of humanity at the biggest social event in 3 galaxies. No pressure at all. The ballroom was the most beautiful and terrifying place he had ever seen. It floated in the center of Station Lumina, a massive sphere of crystal and light. The floor was transparent, showing the stars beneath their feet. The ceiling displayed galaxies spinning slowly, painting everything in soft colors of pink and blue and gold. And the guests. Oh, the guests. Do-hyun had studied alien species for years, but nothing had prepared him for seeing them in person. There were tall beings made entirely of light, their bodies shifting and changing with every emotion. There were small creatures covered in scales that changed color as they talked. There were massive warriors with 4 arms and skin like stone, their deep voices making the floor vibrate. And there were the Mantari. These were the proud warrior caste of the Alliance, standing 7 feet tall with bodies like armored insects. Their compound eyes reflected the light of 1,000 stars, and their mandibles clicked when they spoke. They were considered the most fearsome fighters in all of known space. Right now, a group of Mantari warriors stood near the center of the room. They were laughing about something, their clicking sounds echoing through the hall. Other species gave them respectful nods as they passed. Do-hyun watched all of this from his safe spot near the refreshment table. He had been standing here for almost an hour, trying to look like he belonged while feeling like a child who had wandered into an adult party. A small creature with 6 eyes and fur like silver moonlight approached him. "Human," it said, its voice like wind chimes. "You are the human representative, yes?" Do-hyun bowed politely, the way he had been trained. "Yes, I am Park Do-hyun. It is an honor to meet you." The creature made a sound that might have been laughter. "So formal. So careful. Your species is very careful, yes? You watch and wait and study. This is wise for a young race." "We have much to learn," Do-hyun agreed. "Indeed you do." The creature's 6 eyes blinked one after another. "A word of advice, young human. Tonight, there are guests here from many powerful empires. Some of them are friendly. Some of them are not. And some of them are dangerous beyond your understanding. Watch where you step. Watch who you speak to. And most importantly, watch who you do not speak to." Before Do-hyun could ask what this meant, the creature had already floated away, disappearing into the crowd. Do-hyun frowned. That was strange advice. Watch who you do not speak to? What did that even mean? He looked around the ballroom more carefully now. He noticed something he had missed before. There were patterns in the crowd. Species moved in certain ways, gathering in certain areas, avoiding others. It was like watching a dance with invisible rules that everyone knew except him. And then he saw her. She stood alone near one of the great crystal windows, looking out at the stars. Her skin was pale, almost white, like fresh snow under moonlight. Her hair was long and black, falling past her shoulders like a river of darkness. She wore a dress of deep crimson that seemed to move on its own, flowing around her feet like liquid blood. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. They were silver, bright and cold like winter stars. Even from across the room, Do-hyun could feel the weight of those eyes. She was beautiful, not in the soft, warm way that human women were beautiful. Her beauty was sharp like a blade. It was the kind of beauty that made you want to look away and keep staring at the same time. Do-hyun watched as various aliens passed near her. A Tellurian diplomat, 3 feet tall and covered in blue feathers, started walking toward her with a friendly expression. Then he seemed to notice something. His feathers flattened against his body, and he changed direction so quickly that he almost tripped over his own feet. The Montari warriors, those fearsome fighters who feared nothing, kept their backs to her. They never looked in her direction. Not once. A group of light beings drifted past her position. Their light dimmed. They moved faster, eager to get away. Everyone avoided her. Everyone gave her space. Everyone pretended she did not exist. She stood alone, surrounded by empty floor, like an island in a sea of avoidance. Do-hyun did not understand why. She had not done anything threatening. She just stood there, looking at the stars with an expression that seemed almost sad. No, that was not quite right. It was not sadness. It was something older than sadness. It was the look of someone who had seen so much that nothing surprised them anymore. It was the loneliness of someone who had been alone for a very, very long time. Do-hyun looked down at his purple drink. It blinked at him again. He looked back at the woman in red. His training told him to stay where he was. His training told him to watch and wait and be careful. His training told him that there was clearly something dangerous about this woman, something that made even warrior species avoid her. But his training had not prepared him for the sight of someone standing alone at a party. It had not prepared him for the quiet sadness in silver eyes. It had not prepared him for the simple human impulse to help someone who looked lonely. Do-hyun set down his drink and started walking. The crowd seemed to part around him, not because they were avoiding him, but because they were moving away from the direction he was heading. He heard whispers in languages he did not understand. He felt eyes on his back. Someone made a choking sound. He did not stop. The woman turned as he approached. Those silver eyes fixed on him, and Do-hyun felt a chill run down his spine. It was like being looked at by something ancient, something that had existed when his ancestors were still learning to use fire. But he had come this far. He was not going to run away now. Do-hyun stopped a respectful distance from her and bowed, the same polite bow he had given the six-eyed creature earlier. "Excuse me," he said, and his voice only shook a little bit. "I noticed you standing here alone, and I thought maybe you might like some company." The woman tilted her head. Her crimson lips curved slightly. "Company," she repeated, and her voice was like silk and shadows, soft and cold and somehow intimate. "You approach me to offer company?" "Yes." Do-hyun straightened up and tried to smile. "And if you are willing, I would be honored if you would dance with me." The entire ballroom went silent. Do-hyun had not noticed how much background noise there had been until it was gone. The music continued playing, but no one was talking anymore. No one was moving. Hundreds of eyes from dozens of species were all staring at him. A Tellurian diplomat dropped his drink. The glass shattered on the crystal floor, and no one even looked at it. The Montari warriors had turned around. Their compound eyes were wide, and their mandibles hung open. One of them made a sound like a dying engine. The light beings had stopped moving entirely. their forms frozen in shapes of apparent shock. Do-hyun looked around at the silent crowd, confused. Had he done something wrong? Was asking someone to dance considered an insult in galactic culture? He had studied the protocols. Dancing was supposed to be a polite way to socialize. He looked back at the woman in red. She was staring at him with an expression he could not read. Her silver eyes searched his face, looking for something. "You do not know who I am," she said. It was not a question. "No," Do-hyun admitted. "I am sorry if I should. I am new to all of this. My name is Park Do-hyun, and I am a cultural attaché for the human delegation." He paused. "May I ask your name?" The woman's lips curved further. It was not quite a smile. It was something sharper, something more dangerous. And yet, there was also something else in her expression. Something that looked almost like wonder. "My name," she said slowly, "is Yura. I am the Crimson Empress, ruler of the Nocturne Dominion, queen of the Shadow Realms. I have existed since before your son was born. I have watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. I have consumed entire worlds, drained them of life, left them as empty husks floating in the dark." She took a step closer to him. Do-hyun felt the temperature drop. The light seemed to dim around her, shadows gathering at her feet like loyal pets. "I am a vampire," she whispered. "And not just any vampire. I am their queen. I am the oldest, the strongest, the most feared being in 7 galaxies. Species that have conquered star system bow before me. Warriors who have never known defeat tremble at my name. I could kill everyone in this room before they cowl." The dance lasted for what felt like hours and only seconds at the same time. Do-hyun moved through steps he did not know he knew, guided by hands that were cold as winter ice and gentle as falling snow. The Crimson Empress led him through a dance that was older than human civilization, and somehow his feet found the right places to go. Around them, the ballroom had become very still. Other guests had stopped their own dances. Conversations had died. Every eye in the room was fixed on the impossible sight before them. A human, dancing with the most feared being in all of known space. The music was strange and beautiful. It had no words, but Do-hyun could feel it in his bones. It spoke of darkness and stars, of endless time and forgotten memories. It was the kind of music that made you want to cry without knowing why. "You dance well," Yura said. Her silver eyes never left his face. "Who taught you?" "My mother," Do-hyun replied. "She said every young man should know how to dance. She said it was the mark of a gentleman. A gentleman." The words seemed to amuse her. Your mother was wise. Dancing is the oldest form of communication. Before language, before writing, before all the things that separate one being from another, there was movement. There was the simple act of moving together, of trusting another person to catch you if you fall. Don thought about this. His mother had just wanted him to be able to dance at weddings without stepping on his partner's feet. But the Vampire Queen's explanation was much more beautiful. "You speak as if you remember that time," he said. "The time before language." Yura's lips curved. "I remember many things, little human. I remember the birth of your son. I remember when the first simple life began to move in the warm oceans of your world. I have watched your species grow from clever animals to builders of starships." Her eyes grew distant. "Time passes differently for me. Centuries feel like days. Millennia feel like years. I have seen so much that sometimes I forget what it feels like to be surprised. And are you surprised now?" Do-hyun asked. The Vampire Queen looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I believe I am." They turned and stepped, and the stars spun beneath them like scattered diamonds. Do-hyun could see other dancers reflected in the crystal floor, their bodies distorted and strange. He could see himself, a small figure in black, holding on to something vast and terrible and beautiful. "May I ask you something?" Do-hyun said. "You may ask. I may not answer. Why do they fear you so much?" He gestured slightly at the frozen crowd. "These species, they have conquered planets. They have built empires. They have seen things I cannot imagine. And yet they are afraid of you? Why?" Yura was quiet for several steps. Her cold fingers tightened slightly on his shoulder, not enough to hurt, but enough to notice. "Because they should be," she said. "I am not simply powerful, little human. I am different. The species you see here, no matter how strange they appear, they are all made of the same basic things. Matter and energy. Atoms and molecules. They are born, they live, they die. They follow the rules of the universe." She pulled him closer as they turned. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I do not follow those rules. I exist in the spaces between. I feed on life itself, on the essence that makes living things more than just moving machines. When I consume something, it does not simply die. It becomes part of me. Its memories, its experiences, its very soul, all absorbed into my being." Do-hyun felt a chill that had nothing to do with her cold skin. "I have consumed civilizations," Yura continued. "Not just killed them, but erased them. I have drained worlds until nothing remained but empty rocks floating in silence. I have taken species that had existed for millions of years and ended them so completely that the universe forgot they ever lived." She met his eyes. And in those silver depths, Do-hyun saw something ancient and terrible. He saw endless darkness and forgotten screams. He saw the death of stars and the end of all things. "They fear me because I am death," she whispered. "Not the kind of death that ends pain. The kind that goes on forever." Do-hyun's steps faltered. His heart was racing now, beating so hard he could feel it in his throat. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to let go, to run, to get as far away from this monster as possible. But he did not let go. "If all of that is true," he said, and his voice was shaking now, "then why are you dancing with me? Why did you say yes?" Yura tilted her head. Something shifted in her expression, something that might have been confusion or curiosity or both. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have been asked many things over the ages. I have been offered tribute. I have been offered worship. I have been offered worlds and armies and the secrets of the universe. But no one has ever simply asked me to dance." She paused. "No one has ever looked at me and seen someone who might be lonely." The music swelled around them, filling the silence with its ancient melody. "Are you?" Do-hyun asked softly. "Lonely?" The vampire queen did not answer for a long time. They danced through several more measures, their movements perfectly synchronized despite everything. "I do not know," she said finally. "I have been alone for so long that I am not sure I remember what it feels like to be anything else. I have advisors and servants and subjects who obey my every command. I have enemies who fear me and allies who serve me. But companions?" She shook her head slowly. "I have not had a companion in a very, very long time." "The last one?" Do-hyun asked, remembering the briefing files he had never read. "He was a god," Yura said. "A being of pure energy, born from the heart of a dying star. He was beautiful and powerful, and he loved me in his way." Her voice grew quiet. "I consumed him in the end. I could not help it. It is my nature. Everything I touch, everything I hold close, eventually becomes food." Do-hyun processed this information. He was dancing with a being who had eaten a god. A being who had just told him that everyone she cared about eventually became her meal god. This was probably the most dangerous situation any human had ever been in. And yet, somehow, he was not afraid anymore. Or rather, he was afraid, but the fear had changed. It was no longer the screaming terror of prey in the presence of a predator. It was something quieter, something sadder. He was afraid for her. "That sounds very lonely," he said. Yura blinked. Her silver eyes widened slightly, as if his response was not what she expected. "Most beings," she said slowly, "upon hearing that I consume those I care about, would be more concerned for themselves." "Most beings did not ask you to dance," Do-Yun replied. The vampire queen stared at him. And then, for the second time that night, she laughed. It was a small laugh this time, almost startled, like a bird taking unexpected flight. "You are very strange," she said. "Your species is very strange, so I have been told." They danced in silence for a while. The music had shifted again, becoming softer, more intimate. The crowd around them had begun to move, not dancing, but shifting, whispering to each other in shocked voices. Do-Hyun could see diplomats gesturing frantically, could see military officers speaking urgently into communication devices. He had a feeling he was going to be in a lot of trouble when this dance was over. But right now, in this moment, he did not care. Right now, he was just a man dancing with a woman who had been alone for far too long. "Tell me about your world," Yura said suddenly. "Tell me about humanity." Do-Hyun thought about Earth. He thought about blue oceans and green forests, about cities full of lights and villages full of laughter. He thought about his mother teaching him to dance, about his father cooking breakfast on Sunday mornings, about his younger sister chasing him through the house with a water gun. "We are not like the other species," he said. "We are young. We have only been in space for a few hundred years. We have only been in the Alliance for 3. Compared to everyone else, we are like children who just learned to walk." "And yet you walked across this room," Yura observed. "You approached me when no one else would. Why?" "Because that is who we are," Do-Hyun said. "Humans do not survive by being the strongest or the smartest. We survive by being stubborn, by refusing to accept that something is impossible, by looking at mountains and deciding to climb them, looking at oceans and deciding to cross them, looking at stars and deciding to reach them." He paused, searching for the right words. "We are afraid of many things. We are afraid of the dark, of death, of being alone. But we have learned that the only way to stop being afraid is to face the things that scare us. So we do. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we die. But sometimes we succeed. And when we succeed, we achieve things that no one thought possible." Yura listened to this with an expression that Do-Hyun could not read. Her silver eyes seemed to glow brighter in the dim light. "You are a poet," she said. "I am a file organizer who makes coffee," Do-Hyun corrected. "I was not even supposed to be here tonight. And yet here you are, dancing with the Crimson Empress, speaking of humanity's spirit to someone who has consumed beings far greater than yourself." Her lips curved. Perhaps the universe has a sense of humor after all. The music was slowing now, winding down toward its end. Do-Hyun could feel the dance coming to a close, and he felt a strange reluctance to let go of her cold hands. "May I ask you one more thing?" he said. "You may. What happens now? After this dance? Do you return to your shadow realm? Do we never see each oath?" Do-Hyun thought about his mother's lessons. He thought about his father's stories. He thought about all the humans who had ever looked at something terrifying and decided to face it anyway. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I will go. I will be your owl." Do-Hyun thought about his mother's lessons. He thought about his father's stories. He thought about all the humans who had ever looked at something terrifying and decided to face it anyway. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I will go. I will be your owl." The palace of the Nocturne Dominion was built from darkness itself. Not the simple darkness of night, but something deeper. Something alive. The walls shifted and moved when Do-yoon looked at them. Shadows flowing like water across surfaces that seemed both solid and intangible. Do-yoon walked through the great entrance hall, his footsteps echoing in ways that did not match his movements. The floor beneath him was smooth and cold, made of black crystal that reflected nothing. Above him, a ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into endless dark. There were no lights, yet he could see. The darkness itself seemed to glow with a pale luminescence that came from everywhere and nowhere. Two figures walked beside him, guiding him toward the throne room. They were vampires, like Yura, but different. Where she had been still and controlled, these beings were restless, hungry. Their eyes gleamed red in the darkness, and their movements were sharp and predatory. One of them was male, tall and thin, with pale hair that floated around his head like it was underwater. His name was Jinwoo, and he was one of Yura's oldest nobles. He looked at Do-yoon the way a cat might look at a mouse. The other was female, shorter but somehow more threatening, with features so sharp they seemed to cut the air. Her name was Minji, and she was the commander of Yura's personal guard. She had not spoken a single word since Do-yoon arrived. "You are smaller than I expected," Jinwoo said. His voice was smooth and cold. "When we heard that a human had danced with our queen, I imagined someone more impressive." "I am sorry to disappoint," Do-yoon replied. "Are you?" "You do not seem sorry. You do not seem afraid either." Jinwoo's red eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you do not understand what you have walked into, little human. This is not your bright world of suns and warmth. This is the darkness. This is where things go to die. I understand. Do you?" Jinwoo stopped walking and turned to face him. The noble's presence pressed against Do-yoon like a physical weight, cold and hungry. "Let me explain something to you, human. Our queen has lived for longer than your species has existed. She has consumed gods and broken empires. She has watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. And in all that time, she has never shown interest in anything as weak as a human. Until now. Until now." Jinwoo's lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. "Which means one of two things. Either our queen sees something in you that no one else can see, or she has grown so bored with eternity that she has decided to play with her food before eating it." Minji made a sound, almost like a laugh, but said nothing. Do-yoon considered Jinwoo's words carefully. The noble was trying to frighten him. That much was clear. And it was working, a little. But Do-yoon had learned something in his brief time with Yura. She had spoken to him honestly. She had shown him vulnerability. Whatever she wanted from him, he did not think it was simply a meal. "If she wanted to eat me," Do-yoon said, "she could have done it at the gala. She did not need to bring me all the way here." Jinwoo's eyes flickered. Perhaps she prefers fresh food? Or perhaps she is lonely and she wanted someone to talk to. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Jinwoo stared at Do-yoon with an expression that mixed confusion, anger, and something that might have been surprise. "You think our queen is lonely?" he said flatly. "Yes, the Crimson Empress. The most feared being in existence. Lonely." "But being powerful and being lonely are not mutually exclusive," Do-yoon said. "In fact, I think they often go together. The more powerful you become, the fewer people can truly understand you. The fewer people who can be your equal. The fewer people who can be your friend." Jinwoo opened his mouth to respond, but another voice cut through the darkness. "He speaks truth." Do-yoon turned. Yura stood at the far end of the hall, having appeared without a sound. She wore a different dress now, deep purple that seemed to absorb the pale light around her. Her silver eyes fixed on Do-yoon, and he felt his heart skip a beat. "My queen," Jinwoo said, bowing low. Minji did the same. Yura walked toward them, her movements graceful and unhurried. The shadows seemed to part for her, flowing around her feet like loyal servants. "Leave us," she said to her nobles. "I would speak with the human alone." Jinmu hesitated. "My queen, this creature is unknown. He to be a threat. He's a threat to no one in this palace." Yura's voice was mild, but there was steel beneath it. "And even if he were, do you think I cannot handle a single human?" Jinmu bowed again. "Of course not, my queen. Forgive me." The two nobles retreated into the shadows, their forms dissolving until only Do-hyun and Yura remained. For a moment, neither spoke. Do-hyun looked at the vampire queen, remembering their dance, remembering her cold touch and ancient eyes. She looked the same, yet different somehow. Here, in her own realm, she seemed more solid, more real. "You came," she said finally. "You asked me to. I asked for many things. Few are given." She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the cold radiating from her skin. "Why did you come, Park Do-hyun? You know what I am. You know what I have done. You know that I could end your life without a thought. I know. Then why?" Do-hyun thought about this question. He had asked it to himself many times during the journey here. He had turned it over in his mind, looking for answers that made sense. "Because you were honest with me," he said. "At the gala, you could have lied. You could have pretended to be something you were not. But you told me the truth. You told me about the civilizations you consumed, about the god you drained. You showed me your darkness without trying to hide it." He paused. "And because, despite all of that, I saw something else in you, something that was not darkness." Yura tilted her head. "What did you see?" "Sadness, loneliness, a desire for connection." He met her silver eyes. "I think you have been alone for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to be anything else. I think you have built walls around yourself because you are afraid. Not afraid of others, but afraid of yourself. Afraid of what happens when you let someone in." The vampire queen was very still. In the darkness of her palace, surrounded by shadows and silence, she looked almost fragile. "You presume much, human. I am probably wrong. I am often wrong about things." Do-hyun smiled slightly. "But I have learned that the only way to know someone is to try. To reach out, even when it is scary. To offer kindness, even when you are not sure it will be accepted. And if your kindness is rewarded with death, then at least I will have tried." Yura stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and took his hand on. Her touch was cold, colder than he remembered. It felt like holding ice, like winter had decided to take physical form. But he did not pull away. "Come," she said. "I want to show you something." She led him through the palace, through halls of shadow and rooms of darkness. They passed chambers where vampire nobles gathered, watching them with hungry eyes. They passed gardens where flowers made of crystallized night bloomed in impossible colors. They passed libraries where books written in languages older than time sat on shelves of polished obsidian. Finally, they came to a balcony overlooking the realm below. Do-hyun stopped breathing. The nocturne dominions spread out beneath them like a dark mirror of the galaxy he knew. There were cities built of shadow, towers rising into skies that held no stars. There were rivers of something that looked like liquid night, flowing through valleys of eternal darkness. There were mountains that seemed to be made of frozen screams, their peaks reaching toward moons that glowed with pale, cold light. And everywhere, there was life. Not the warm, bright life of human worlds, but something different. Something adapted to the darkness. Creatures moved through the shadows, beings that had no names in any human language, living and thriving in ways that should have been impossible. "This is my realm," Yura said beside him. "This is what I have built over millions of years. This is my empire of shadows. It is beautiful, Do-yoon whispered. YUR turned to look at him. You think so? It is different from anything I have ever seen. It is strange and dark and a little terrifying. But there is beauty in it. He looked at her. Like you. The vampire queen's expression shifted. Something flickered in her silver eyes. Something warm in all that cold. You say strange things, human. Things no one has said to me in a very long time. I am just being honest. Yes, I believe you are. She turned back to the view. I brought you here because I want you to understand. What you see below is not simply an empire. It is a cage. A cage I have built around myself over countless centuries. A cage? I am the Crimson Empress, the queen of this realm. Every creature you see down there owes their existence to me. Every shadow, every darkness, every cold and hungry thing. They serve me. They obey me. They fear me. Her voice dropped. But none of them know me. None of them understand me. They see the crown. They see the power. They do not see the woman beneath. Da-hyun understood suddenly why she had invited him here. It was not for politics or diplomacy or any of the reasons Captain Sujin had imagined. It was for this. For someone who could see her as she truly was. At the gala, Yura continued, you walked across a room full of beings who knew too. Centuries passed, as centuries do. The galaxy changed in ways that no one had predicted. Alliances shifted. New species emerged. Old empires fell. But through all of it, one thing remained constant. The strange friendship between humanity and the Nocturne Dominion. Historians would later mark that first dance as the turning point. Not just for humans, but for all of known space. Before that night, the Crimson Empress had been a terror, a mystery, a shadow that civilizations feared. After that night, she became something else. She became an ally. It did not happen quickly. Trust takes time to build, especially trust between species so different. There were misunderstandings. There were conflicts. There were moments when it seemed like the fragile connection between human and vampire would shatter completely. But it did not shatter, because every time things grew difficult, every time the darkness seemed too deep to cross, there was Park Do-hyun, standing in the middle, building bridges with nothing but kindness and stubborn hope. He became the first human ambassador to hold permanent residence in the Nocturne Court. He learned to navigate the shadows, to speak with beings of darkness, to understand customs that predated human civilization. He sent reports back to Earth, but more than that, he sent stories. Stories of the vampire queen who was not simply a monster. Stories of a realm that held beauty as well as terror. Stories that helped humanity understand that even the darkest corners of the universe held something worth knowing. And through it all, he stayed close to Yura. Their relationship was difficult to define. She was not human, and he could not live forever. She was a predator, and he was, by her nature, prey. But somehow, they made it work. They found a balance. He gave her warmth. She gave him purpose. He showed her kindness. She showed him wonders beyond human imagination. They never married, in the human sense. But in the Nocturne Dominion, they were recognized as bonded. Two souls connected across an impossible distance. A human and a vampire queen, choosing each other despite everything. Many predicted it would end in tragedy. They said Yura would eventually consume Do-hyun, the way she had consumed everyone else she cared about. They said his bright human spirit would be extinguished by her endless darkness. But the years passed, and he remained. The decades passed, and she did not consume him. Something had changed in the Crimson Empress. The human had reached something in her that hunger could not touch. He had found her heart, and in finding it, he had helped her remember how to use it. 50 years after that first dance, Do-hyun stood on the same balcony where Yura had first shown him her realm. His hair was gray now, and lines had formed around his eyes. Human lives were short, so terribly short compared to the endless existence of a vampire queen. Yura stood beside him, unchanged. She would never age. She would never grow old. But she had grown in other ways. The sadness in her silver eyes had softened. The ancient loneliness had eased. She smiled more often now, real smiles that reached her eyes. "You are thinking about death again," she said. Do-hyun smiled. "You always know what I am thinking. It is hard to miss. Your thoughts are very loud, for a human." She moved closer, putting her cold arm around his shoulders. "You are worried about leaving me alone. Yes, you should not worry. I survived millions of years before you came. I will survive after you go. But will you be happy?" Yura did not answer immediately. Below them, the realm of shadows stretched out like a dark ocean. Cities glittered with pale light. Rivers of night flowed between mountains of crystallized darkness. It was beautiful and terrible and strange, this empire she had built. "I do not know," she admitted. "I did not know what happiness felt like until you showed me. I'm not sure I will remember how to feel it without you." Do-hyun turned to face her. He took her cold hands in his wrinkled ones, the way he had done so many times over so many years. "Then let me teach you," he said. "In the time I have left, let me show you everything. Every small joy, every simple pleasure, every reason to smile. Let me fill you up with enough happiness to last another million years. You cannot do that. You are one small human. I am endless. Then I will try anyway. I have been doing impossible things my whole life. Why stop now?" Yura looked at him with an expression that mixed sorrow, joy, and deep, profound love. "You are still a fool," she said. "After all these years, you are still the same brave, kind fool who asked me to dance. And you are still a lonely woman I saw standing by a window, the one I wanted to help." He reached up and touched her cheek, feeling the cold smoothness of her skin. "I have never regretted asking you to dance, Yura. Not once. Not even for a moment. Even knowing what I am. Even knowing what I've done. Especially knowing that. Because I also know what you can become. I have seen it. I have watched you grow and change and open your heart. I have watched you become something more than the monster you thought you were." He smiled. "You are my greatest adventure, and I am grateful for every moment." The Vampire Queen, the Crimson Empress, the most feared being in all of existence, felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt tears forming in her eyes. Vampires did not cry. Their bodies did not produce tears. But somehow, in this moment, holding the hands of the dying human who had changed her existence, Yura wept. "I do not want you to go," she whispered. "I know, but that is the nature of things. Humans live, and then we die. It is what makes our lives precious. It is what makes every moment matter." He wiped her tears with gentle fingers. "I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will not close yourself off again. Promise me you will keep reaching out, keep making connections, keep letting people in. There will be other humans who need your help. Other species who could benefit from knowing you. Promise me you will give them the same chance you gave me." Yura hesitated. The thought of letting anyone else close, after losing Do-hyun, was almost too painful to bear. But she had learned something from this human. She had learned that the pain of connection was worth the joy it brought. She had learned that being alone was worse than being hurt. "I promise," she said. "Good." Do-hyun smiled, and despite his age, despite his wrinkles and gray hair, it was the same smile he had worn on that first night. The smile of a young man who saw a lonely woman and decided to help. "Now, my queen, I believe I owe you one more dance." They danced there, on the balcony of shadows, under the light of 3 pale moons. There was no music, but they did not need it. They moved together the way they always had, in perfect harmony, the ancient vampire and the aging human. And when the dance was over, and though Yoon closed his eyes for the last time, he was smiling. He had lived a good life. He had done impossible things. He had loved someone who should have been beyond loving. And he had made a difference. 100 years after the first dance, a young human diplomat named Yuna arrived at the Nocturne Court. She had heard the stories about Park Do-hyun, the legendary ambassador who had befriended the Crimson Empress. She had studied his life, read his reports, tried to understand how one man had achieved such an incredible thing. Now, standing in the throne room of crystallized darkness, she faced the vampire queen herself. Yura sat on her throne of obsidian and bone, looking exactly as she had in all the old recordings. Pale skin, silver eyes, crimson dress. She was ancient and beautiful and terrifying, just as the stories said. But Yuna had learned something from those stories. She had learned that even the most fearsome beings could be reached with kindness. "Welcome to the Nocturne Dominion," Yura said. Her voice was cold, but not hostile. "You are the new human liaison." "Yes, Your Majesty. I am honored to be here." "Why do humans keep sending ambassadors to my court? Other species avoid me. Only humans seem determined to maintain this connection." Yuna thought about this question. She thought about the stories she had heard, about the man who had danced with a vampire queen. "Because Ambassador Park taught us something important," she said. "He taught us that no one is too powerful to need a friend. He taught us that kindness can reach places that fear cannot. He taught us that humans are not defined by our strength, but by our willingness to reach out." Yura was quiet for a long moment. Yuna saw something flicker in those silver eyes, something that might have been grief or memory or hope. "You knew him," Yuna added softly. "You knew him better than anyone. Was he right? Is that what humans are?" The Crimson Empress, the most feared being in all of existence, allowed herself to smile. It was a small smile, tinged with sadness, but genuine. "Yes," she said. "He was right. Humans are not the strongest species. You are not the oldest or the wisest or the most powerful. But you have something that no other species has. You have the ability to see beyond what something appears to be. You have the